Coming up in today's newscast, Israel is bracing for a deadly missile attack from Iran. Hamas is apparently seeking a long-term ceasefire with Israel. And the summer may be just around the corner, but be careful what sunscreen you use, because Israeli researchers have just discovered that some contain a dangerous chemical. Israel is bracing for deadly impact from Iranian missiles. The defense ministry says Tehran is preparing a military counterattack for the airstrikes allegedly conducted by Israeli jets last month. Bombings that targeted Iran's T-4 base in Syria and left a number of Iranian nationals dead. Defense officials say Iran is mobilizing its proxy armies in Syria, likely Hezbollah, to fire missiles at sites in northern Israel. These targets would most likely be IDF military bases because a strike against civilian targets would almost certainly spiral into an all-out war. In truth, this may be the scenario Israel is actually seeking. Under intense pressure from Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Trump is expected to pull the U.S. out of the JCPOA nuclear deal with Iran in less than 5 days. Iranian officials have confirmed that Iran would then pull out of the deal as well, likely resuming its nuclear program immediately. Such a situation would leave the rest of the world's powers scattered and without a plan B. Still, Netanyahu continues to lobby hard for the deal's collapse. He argues that a problematic deal is just as bad as no deal at all. Leaders on the opposition, however, have been doing their best to salvage the deal because they say even with its flaws, it buys the world several years before Iran can enrich the required uranium to develop a nuclear warhead. The biggest thing likely to sway Trump away from nixing the deal, however, probably isn't the likelihood of world war, but rather the multi-billion-dollar deals that would collapse if the deal fell apart. Billions of dollars worth of oil and airplane deals funneling from Washington all the way to Tehran are in limbo as the world awaits Trump's decision. Not to mention the millions of people around the world fearing that this may all be leading to war. Joining us now in the studio with more on Israel's preparation for war with Iran is founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies, Dr. Martin Sherman. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me again.
So how likely do you think an attack will be?
Well, I think that it must be the working assumption. I don't think that Iran can keep on restraining itself and absorbing Israeli attacks without doing anything. I mean, put it the other way, if the Iranians had attacked Israel and caused that kind of damage, I imagine that Israel would have responded. So I think that the plausible assumption is that they will attack.
And when we're talking about this type of attack, I mean, northern Israel has been the area that is obviously of most concern. Where will we see these attacks happen if they were to happen? What would the targets be? What is the time frame here?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure that northern Israel would be the only target. Unfortunately, since the bungling of the Second Lebanon War, they've allowed a huge buildup of missiles in South Lebanon. South Lebanon itself could target virtually any target within Israel, civilian or military. I think we should brace for the worst. And by the way, I'm not sure that this isn't a very good reason for Israel to launch massive preemption.
Interesting, and I'd like to get into that as well. But I mean, there are questions as to whether Iran is going to be involved directly or it's going to be sending a proxy to carry out these attacks. Hezbollah just had a big election win, so obviously Israel is very much focused on that as well. What is your take on who would be carrying this out?
I think that Israel must be ready, must gear for attacks either from Iran directly, because that would give them the most prestige, saying that they could actually take revenge on the attack from the Zionist entity. But I don't think they would balk from using Hezbollah either. And so, unless you believe that the Hezbollah is amassing all these rockets just for show, then at some stage they're going to use them. And the question is, does Israel allow the other side to choose the timing and the location of the attack?
Right, which brings us back to your point about whether or not it's right for Israel to be making a preemptive attack right now. What is your take on that?
Well, I think it's inevitable. Letting the other side launch the attack first has tremendous risks. Hezbollah, as an Iranian proxy, has over 100,000, 150,000 according to some reports, rockets, which is a completely different kettle of fish from what there was in Protective Edge. They have rockets now far more, with far more precision and far more explosives. So, you know, I don't think that any responsible Israeli government can really let the other side choose the timing and the location of the attack.
Well, we are obviously going to have to wait and see what happens here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yesterday was the first general election in Lebanon in nearly a decade. Exit polls are now coming in, and for many it looks like their biggest fears have been realized. Hezbollah's political party is expected to come out on top and dominate the new Lebanese parliament for the coming term. ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here with analysis. And Brett, how should Israel be taking this news?
Well, look, like with everything, I think Israel needs to proceed with caution. But even though this may seem like a huge, shocking turn of events, Lebanon's parliament is still a really big ship to steer, and even Hezbollah's political faction alone isn't enough to steer it completely on its own. And I say that acknowledging that, yes, Hezbollah is sponsored by Iran, and this is a scary proposition, but still, it's a big ship. It's a big operation.
Well, Hezbollah has obviously been a critical part of the Lebanese government for years now. Its own armed wing, which is widely seen as a terrorist organization, nearly outguns Lebanon's own state army. And that's why some Israeli leaders have often said that you can't separate Lebanon from Hezbollah, even in times of war. Given these results, is that now the case?
Well, obviously, with a government where Hezbollah serves as the majority leading party, that's becoming easier and easier to argue. But we have a few things to consider here about this election. So first, voter turnout was low, and not just because of there's no foul play suspected, there's no voter intimidation or fraud suspected, but still shockingly lower than expected overall. And especially considering that this was Lebanon's first primary election in almost a decade, that's a pretty big deal. It says a lot. Second, yes, Hezbollah's victory here says something big about the direction that the country is going in general. But here's something else that we did just see. 2 women are expected to land seats in the parliament this coming term as well. And now there have been women in the parliament before now, but for a country that may be becoming more, more radical politically, this is a pretty significant silver lining, if there's any silver lining to see here. Lebanon's government still ranks as one of the lowest in the world for female representation, so that's a big deal.
Yeah, sure, but even given the opposition parties Hezbollah will face in the parliament, are we going to be seeing major changes in Lebanon, or even become, more aggressive when it comes to Israel specifically?
Honestly, I would say that even in Lebanon right now, that is generally not the feeling. There's no big feeling that there's going to be a big change, a big radical shift. I know that may sound strange given these results, but after all, Hezbollah is pretty clear that it wants to wipe Israel off the map. But look at how politics in Lebanon actually work. Most of the system is still based on inheriting posts, family dynasties, even handing parliament seats and entire elections to sons when the father becomes too old to run again. That's how their system works. So some of this election, regardless of the outcome, feels more symbolic than anything else.
Yeah, well, still, I doubt things will shift to any kind of foreseeable peace with Israel. The head of Lebanon's next government will probably still be very firmly against that.
Agreed, though I will say that, as the arts and the culture continues to develop in Lebanon, just in the people, there is a growing sense that in the fringes of Lebanese society, there may be some people warming up to that idea of a kind of a people's peace, but obviously we'll see, and we're a long ways away.
All right, well, on that note, thank you for the information, Brett.
Of course.
Well, this is a bit of a surprise. We've just learned that Hamas is apparently seeking a long-term ceasefire with Israel. The terror group is reportedly willing to offer big, unprecedented compromises, like halting violence and even a prisoner swap, all in exchange for Israel easing its blockade of the Gaza Strip. Rumors of deteriorating conditions and intense infighting have been plaguing Hamas for some time now. Even as the group's March of Return protest enters week 7, the group has apparently been fiercely divided about halting the violent rallies altogether. With the Palestinian reconciliation deal all but dead, Hamas also faces economic disaster as well. The Israeli blockade, compounded by sanctions from the Palestinian Authority and security controls from Egypt, means that the snake may finally be eating its own tail to survive here. Hamas leadership is reportedly intensely divided on how the group should proceed, but word of a possible ceasefire deal has managed to find its way to Israeli intelligence officials, who have put it on the table for Israeli leadership. At this time, Israel has not responded to any alleged terms of such a deal. Given the horrific bloodshed seen in recent weeks along the Gaza border, Israel may be unwilling to trust any such deal anyhow. This wouldn't be the first time Hamas has sought a ceasefire, but still, with the terror group running out of options, we may be seeing these rumors turn into something more concrete in the near future. Well, speaking of peace, not everyone agrees with the governments of the world about how peace in the Middle East should look. In fact, some, like my next guest, have taken a very unique approach to solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And so here with more is journalist and co-founder of A Land for All, Meron Rapaport. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, so what does A Land for All suggest regarding peace?
The Land for All suggests that we should concentrate on sharing the land instead of separating it. For 25 years, the idea for a solution was, let's separate Israelis from Arabs, from Palestinians. We here, they are there, and a wall between us. We think that this way will not lead to peace, but peace must be based on sharing and interdependence between an independent Israeli state and an independent Palestinian state.
Interesting. So what would that look like?
It would look like, I think the best thing to think about it is a EU model. We are not here to copy the EU exactly, but the idea of the EU, of independent states, sovereign state, completely sovereign, responsible for their own matters, but with open borders and a shared institution governing the whole of the space, I think this could tackle, at least, the three main problems that are not tackled now, which are refugees, settlers, and Jerusalem.
Now, what about security? Obviously, that's one of the biggest concerns for the state of Israel. How would that fit into this equation?
Security, according to our idea, first of all, lies in a mutual security arrangement between the two independent states. Peace, security treaty, defense treaty between the two states, joint forces on the external border of Israel and Palestine, let's say on the Jordan River, on the border with Egypt, etc. But I think the main idea is when there will be interdependence between the two states, I think security will be much more given by such an arrangement.
Right. Well, obviously, I mean, this is a very idealistic, situation and world that we'd be living in because, what do you do with the PLO, with Hamas, obviously with the distrust among the Israeli community towards the Palestinians as a whole? How do you kind of deal with that?
I think it deals much more with reality on the ground, because the reality on the ground is that we are mixed, Israelis and Palestinians. There are 6 million Palestinians, 6 million Jews between the river and the sea. We are intertwined, and this is the reality. So we are more closer to reality. But, the only realistic thing is the continuation of the status quo. And we are going and this is untenable, and we cannot support it. So I think it's a better solution, it's a more realistic one.
Well, obviously, we need a lot more than 3 minutes to kind of get through the different facets of this plan that your organization has put together. But it was very interesting to hear from you. And for those who are interested in hearing more about this, check out A Land for All. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Here's a disturbing fact. It's estimated that 50% of the plastic produced every year is used just once before being thrown out. That means that millions of tons of plastic get dumped into our oceans every year, and experts expect plastic trash to outnumber fish by 2050. Well, here in Israel, the environmental NGO Tzalul is pushing back, and joining us with more is Tzalul's CEO, Maya Jacobs. Now, this is a very interesting topic. What are some of the main issues that Israel faces when it comes to plastic pollution?
Well, we're not different than any other place on earth, I'm afraid. It's a plague that everybody is suffering from. The whole issue of disposable plastic has become really a plague. For us in Israel, we are at the edge of the eastern side of the Mediterranean, which means that we receive all the trash that comes from North Africa, which aren't very clean and environmental countries, I'll say. And yet, 60% of the trash that we find in the sea comes from Israelis who go to the beach, and it's a big problem.
It's a huge problem. I mean, there's a culture of just not caring. You go to the beach, you leave your, your bottles, your plastic, whatever it is, on the ground. But I think also what is so interesting is the fact that people here aren't necessarily living as green as they could. Just recently, there was a law that was passed to charge people for plastic bags. And,
yeah, we're responsible for that.
And you're responsible for that. So tell us, some of the steps that you...
Okay, so basically what we're trying to do is eliminate the use from the beginning. So we passed the law against plastic bags, which only cost like 5 cents, less than 5 cents if you do it as a dollar. It's 10 agorot. You can buy 10 bags for 10 agorot, which is a very, very low price, too low in our eyes.
Right. Well, yeah, it's not that much of a deterrent.
It's not at all, exactly. We would like people to really embrace the idea of not bringing a plastic bag, not buying a plastic bag, but rather bringing a bag from home. Also, in Israel, for some reason, there's a separation between the small bottles and the bigger bottles. The 1.5 liter bottles are not considered eligible for deposit. Deposit. So when you want to have a financial aspect for a bottle, so you have all the small bottles that people collect them and they reuse them, they sell them, and they receive money for that. The money that is deposited for that. And for the big bottles in Israel, there's no deposit for that. So now we're trying to change this law as well.
Well, I mean, listen, there's so many things, and I would love you to go through this entire list of what needs to change. But what would I say is the main kind of message that you would like to send to our viewers about why this is so important?
The main message is that everywhere around the world we have at least one big leader who is taking this on their shoulders and making this into a big issue as an agenda. And in Israel, we lack this leader. We don't have this one politician or one leader, some prominent figure that would be the spokesperson of this problem. So we find ourselves as an NGO leading the entire battle, and it's a lot of work. There's a lot of misunderstanding. It's the easiest thing is to live with disposable plastic from whatever. And it costs us more at the end of the day.
Well, and I think it also just comes down to kind of the individual understanding the importance of this issue. But for those who are wanting to get involved with your organization, what is the website?
Well, Tzalul means clear in Hebrew. So Tzalul is spelled Z-A-L-U-L. And our website is www.zalul.org.il. And you can also find us on Facebook.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Now, this may sound like something out of the Jetsons, but the world's biggest meat companies are actually looking to take animals out of the equation and create meat that's 100% synthetic. That's exactly why the largest meat processor in America, Tyson Foods, has just invested big bucks in an Israeli firm that grows artificial meat all in the lab. Future Meat Technologies has spent years trying to cultivate fat and muscle cells into blocks of meat that are ready to eat. Though synthetic meat isn't necessarily a new thing, recreating the taste and texture of actual beef has proven elusive. Well, not if Israeli innovators have anything to say about it.
This is what we want to get. That primordial filling, that polyaromatic hydrocarbons that is from fat. And this fat you can put everywhere. Right? We are planning to make our own cultured meat, but we can also integrate it in meat substitutes, whether this is vegetarian chicken nuggets or burgers. In a few years, we hope that they will be completely replaced with our technology.
In the past, culturing meat like this has cost upwards of 20 grand per kilogram. But Professor Yaakov Nachmias of the Israeli-based firm says they hope to get that down to $5 by next year. This would be a critical breakthrough, not only because of the skyrocketing demand for food all over the world, but also because it would make meat production something all nations could afford. Experts estimate an industry-wide move to synthetic meat would also produce 96% less hazardous greenhouse gases and conserve millions of gallons of water a year.
We don't have enough water resources, we don't have enough land resources to grow the meat demands for the rapidly developing Chinese and Indian economies. This is why Tyson has been investing in substitute technologies. And they're very interested in our technology because we essentially have a roadmap ahead. It's not only an innovation and something that would be nice to have, we actually have a price point that can actually reach and breach the market.
But let's be real, even if all you care about is the taste, this artificial meat of the future has already gotten the stamp of approval from Israeli master chefs. And considering how seriously Israelis take their food, I'll be the first in line to give a lab-grown meat burger a try. It's unbelievable. All right, the last stage of the Giro d'Italia cycling race has come to an end here in Israel, and the event is now heading back to Europe to resume the rest of the tour. ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh is here with the details.
Thanks, Natasha. Yesterday was the third and final stage of the race for Israel, with a 229-kilometer or 142-mile race from the city of Beersheba to Eilat. Italian rider Elia Viviani won 2 stages, one being yesterday's, and then also the stage from Haifa to Tel Aviv on Saturday, finishing in 5 hours, 2 minutes, and 9 seconds.
Well, I mean, I can't believe that it's all coming to an end. Saturday, when I walked out of my house, the whole city was going nuts, cheering the riders on, taking videos, and it was such a special thing to see here in Israel. This definitely wasn't an easy event to plan in this country.
No, not at all. From what I understand, this was the most complicated, expensive, and logistically challenging sporting event Israel is yet to host, and that's according to Sports and Culture Minister Miri Regev. It's been reported that the 3-day event cost around 120 million shekels, or $33 million, and was mainly funded by Sylvan Adams, an amateur cyclist and real estate businessman from Canada who moved to Israel just 2 years ago.
And it's such an honor for Israel because, it's in its 101-year history. The Giro d'Italia has never started outside of Europe. This year, it finally managed to actually happen because of Sylvan Adams, who had the idea of starting the race here in Israel to coincide with the country's 70th birthday.
Right. It's such an unbelievable honor and such great exposure for Israel, of course. I mean, I read somewhere that last year over 840 million people watched some portion of the race on TV, and then this year there are already expected to be 1 billion people watching. And just to give our American viewers a little contrast, the Super Bowl had 114 million viewers. So we're just saying, that's crazy exposure.
It's unreal to hear how many people will be watching and cheering the riders on. But for now, the Giro says goodbye to the Holy Land, and it's making its way back to Italy. Thanks for joining us, Emmanuel.
Thank you.
It's important to wear sunscreen to protect your skin, but you may want to think twice about which sunscreen you're using. Israeli researchers have just discovered that certain sunscreens contain a chemical that actually harms the environment, and more specifically, our coral reefs. In fact, they've even managed to trace the exact source of toxic coral bleaching, and Hawaii is taking the news seriously. The tropical state has just banned the chemical altogether in an effort to save its gorgeous aquatic habitats.
Oxybenzone, also known as BP3, can be found in nearly 3,500 over-the-counter products all over the world. It's an essential ingredient in helping personal care products protect our skin from the sun's harmful ultraviolet radiation. Unfortunately, it turns out that this chemical has caused irreparable harm to the Earth's delicate oceans. In sunscreen especially, nearly 14,000 tons of the chemical finds its way into coral reefs every year by swimmers entering the water. That places nearly 10% of the Earth's reefs directly in harm's way due to exposure. Israeli scientists actually teamed up with American researchers back in 2015 to isolate BP3 as the lethal ingredient that was destroying coral reefs. Israeli teams initially conducted this potentially Earth-saving research when popular coral reef sites in Eilat began dying. Hawaii's state legislature has taken those findings and become the first government to totally ban the chemical altogether. The EU actually tried to adopt a similar ban as well, but failed to gain enough support. The hope now is that Hawaii's ban may set the legal precedent needed to give other governments the go-ahead too. Our Earth's oceans and delicate coral reef systems are a delicate ecosystem that our own existence depends on. If those resources take a turn for the worst, there's no getting them back.
The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by IDC Samru Ulpan, open to everyone.
Here comes our Hebrew word of the day. Israeli research may help Hawaii save its gorgeous and delicate coral reef. So today's word is Reef al-Mogim, which is how you say a coral reef in Hebrew. If you've ever gotten to see a Reef al-Mogim, a coral reef, up close, then you already know why they're worth saving. A Reef al-Mogim is home to millions of species of exotic wildlife: fish, birds, turtles, algae, you name it. Here's a crazy fact, actually. There are more species of fish living in 2 acres of a Reef al-Mogim than all of the species of birds in North America combined. But remember, a Reef al-Mogim is more than just an exotic tourist destination. It's actually a living, breathing ecosystem, and one that our own ecosystem depends on. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast on that note. Tonight should be partly cloudy with a chance of rainstorms and a drop in temperatures. The low will be about 64 or 18 degrees Celsius, and tomorrow you can expect another drop in temperatures and cloudy skies with a high of around 75 or 24 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.62 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.